Hi, Isaiah,
Hey,
can
how
you
you
hear
doing?
me?
Yes, I can hear you
Great.
just fine.
Wonderful to see you and meet you. Thank you so much for making the time. I know because I've been following you now that you are a very busy human. So it's a real privilege
Oh yeah,
to speak with you. Thanks for jumping on. Where are we finding you in the world today?
I am in LA currently.
Cool.
Fresh,
Awesome. I'm a
fresh
little
around
north
the
of you.
lockdown.
Up and down. Oh, yes. Here we go. Well, we have 45 minutes. I know it's going to go very quickly because you cover so many incredibly fascinating and timely and important topics in your book. And I know you're doing a lot of further advocacy and speaking up and helping to drive change and awareness across these areas you touch on. So I have probably hours of questions I could ask you. I'm going to try to keep it to a few highlights. First of all, just so we kind of have a framework of what to expect for people who are following. We'll start with just a little bit of an intro about you, your background, how you came to write the book, what your kind of core messaging hopes to be. Also want to talk a bit about just crypto adoption generally, which I know is a big theme. Want to talk a bit about Bitcoin and protest and advocacy, particularly in America today. And then really the meat of, I think, of a lot of what you get to, which is very courageous and pointed, particularly right now around the legacy financial system and the opportunities that crypto really brings to this moment. So how's that sound? We ready?
Sounds, yeah, perfect. Sounds good.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, first of all, I know how hard it is to write a book. So congrats on getting that out and in time. And every time I see a book on the shelf now, I really just think about what the author went through. So I'd love to hear if we could kick off with just a little bit of your background, like what your story is, how you got to where you are today, and then what brought you to write this book and what that experience was like. What drove you? Because it's a big project to pull something like that off, particularly in this time.
Absolutely. So I first learned about Bitcoin in 2013 and of course cryptocurrency as well. I saw a video from Max Kaiser, who's very animated, and he pretty much convinced me that this should be the way to go. And, you know, at the time I was a high school teacher, teaching computer science and game art design. So I was, you know, as a teacher, you're notoriously broke. It's just honest. And I was in a state where it was one of the lowest paying states. So, you know, you start to look for ways to make money. And I thought about Bitcoin as a solution. And, you know, as I progressed through Bitcoin, if you remember the bear market of 2014, 2015, taught me a lot. And I also learned that price doesn't really matter. The adoption of this technology is what matters. So, you know, ironically enough, I learned about it from a banker, but it just kind of showed that they had no clue what they were up against. We had a meeting about it, and he came home. He was my roommate at the time, and he just told me, because I have a tech background, no, you might understand it. You know, I don't think we'll ever use it. So that's pretty much how I got into the space. And once I went through that bear market, started learning more about monetary policy, about history, about how money works, financial markets, learning how to trade and all those things, got me into the mindset of helping others do the same. So in 2016, I started consulting. And one of the biggest things about consulting or education is that most of my clients were Black. And unfortunately, I can't get to everybody as efficiently as I wanted to. I knew that this had to be something that was out in the world as early as possible. And that is what led me to writing the book. Around 2016, you know, I really thought, you know, after Ferguson protests and some of the other protests we had before, it's 2016. That's what I'm thinking at the time. I was like, well, Bitcoin might be able to solve it, because financially, every time we have protests, there's no solution at the end of it. It's just like, all right, well, we're mad, and then nothing happens. So I got that idea then. I started writing the book last year and published it last year in July. And I really thought, you know, as far as timing, I thought something like this would happen again. There would be some sort of uprising and protest. Simply because just following, you know, I'm only 31 years old, but I've noticed every time there's an election year, there's some sort of social unrest. So I wanted to write it before 2020 because I knew something was going to happen. Not sure exactly what, but I knew it would be something. And I wanted to make sure that there was some sort of solution economically that we haven't tried yet. I mean, Black people have gotten jobs. They've gotten into politics. They've become president. They've become, Harvard graduate. They've done everything. We've done everything, and it didn't work. So I was looking for a better solution, and that's what drove me to write the book, and that's why I'm here today.
That is so cool. So I have to ask, it sounds like you wrote it pretty quickly. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like what your actual process was like? How long did it take you? And where did you write? Like, were you doing this on the road? Were you doing it at home? Tell us a little bit of some of the detail around how this came to be, because you did write it at such an important moment, and you're so fortunate to get it out and finished in time from now.
Oh, yeah. And I've always had the thoughts in my mind. So one of the things that helped was speaking into a recorder. So anybody that's looking at writing a book, just talking. And one of the biggest feedbacks I get from the book is it sounds like conversation. It sounds like me talking to you through the book. So it was sort of me talking into my phone, recording it, and then writing it down later. I'm in LA, so there's a lot of great scenery. I wrote 90% of the book outside. On a laptop. I just think being in the sun, getting the good old vitamin D, either being in the mountains or a beach, or just sitting outside regular. And, I remember one chapter I wrote in one sitting. I was sitting at a bus stop. I wasn't taking the bus, but it was a guy, a homeless guy was sat beside me, and he kind of inspired me to write more, because I was telling him about Bitcoin. He had heard of it, and, I was kind of surprised. So it kind of, helped me to write, inspiration wise going forward. And, as far as the writing process, there is no one way to do it. I would like to think I think like a businessman, but I work like an artist. So if I don't have inspiration, I just don't do it. So I may go a week without writing, but then I may write 40 pages in one day. So that was sort of my process. And even though the book is short, I wanted to keep it short. The book was about twice that size when I first wrote it. I had to take out a lot of stuff because I realized, in my opinion, if you have a very long book, it's a very daunting task to finish it. You won't be as likely to go out and actually do the solutions or practice the solutions in the book. So that was the writing process. And I was encouraging anybody who's looking to write a book, find something and know your audience. So, that was the two biggest things. And that's why I decided to write this book.
That's amazing. Well, your passion comes through a lot in the way you speak to it as well. And preparing for meeting you today, I was able to pick up some of your podcasts and other recorded videos and the like. And if you're not already doing it, I hope that you do prepare an audio version of it, or it is released in the wild, because it isn't yet, because it's really powerful hearing you talk about your message. It's clear it's coming from a very passionate place, and that's super strong. So I love it. Before we move on. Oh, sorry, go ahead. We have a little bit of a delay, so please go ahead.
Oh, good. The audiobook is coming soon, so I will say that.
Awesome. You're clearly striking a chord, because when I went to buy it, there was a delay. I couldn't just get it immediately from Amazon. So those of you out there who are listening today or in the future to recording, be patient, because there's a bit of a backlog of demand, which is such a fantastic signal. I'm happy for you to have such great reception. It's awesome. Before we move on from the book itself, for those who haven't read it yet, tell us what your kind of core message is. Like, you have to tell us what the key takeaway is. Somebody sits down, they maybe, burn through it in a weekend. What's the, maybe one or two things you want your readers to walk away with, kind of impact wise?
Absolutely. So even though the book is directed towards my community, the number one thing I wanted people to walk away with is the inflation-based economy that we live in under the Fed doesn't work for anybody. So even if you're not Black, everybody is pretty much getting messed over by the Fed right now. So the number one thing you need to realize is that even if you feel comfortable, if you're making money, you should have more. You should have more resources. So even if you feel like you're doing okay, you should have more. And for those who are marginalized, remembering the key of everything, the foundation is the printing of money, and the inflation-based economy that we have takes wealth out of your hands and out of your future generations. So that's the number one thing I want people to remember as they're reading the book. And then number two, as a solution, Bitcoin has been the best store of value the last decade, the best performing asset this year. And as a savings account, nothing really compares. And as far as crypto goes, being able to use it without, without any type of resistance from a government. Remember, in America, we're kind of spoiled. Everybody thinks our money's never going to be devalued. It's never we're always the number one currency. But then when you look around the world, the number two thing I want to make sure people realize is this is an international currency. Bitcoin is, cryptocurrencies are, anybody can use this around the world. So the governments that get in the way that you feel like with rules, all that's going away. Just stay vigilant, keep going forward. So those are the two main things I would say.
Awesome. And I think we're cutting right to the heart of some of what I wanted to get to. So I want to run with that. We can come back to things like adoption and a little bit more of the general areas in a moment. But this notion of technology and specifically crypto as a means to equity, justice, and access, that's a super powerful message. And it's coming through in your voice and your various projects that you're doing now, in addition to and around the book. And there's an opportunity for the perception of crypto as maybe sketchy or questionable or even criminal, as to shift into, actually, this is a tool for decentralization. This is a way to kind of advance equity and access on a global scale. For those who aren't totally familiar with how Bitcoin works or crypto works, or maybe even some of the experiences that the Black community has in its history and in its current moment, can you talk to that? Like, tell us how this works and why it is so important, and where you see the potential is. Where could we go with this? And what does it mean?
So when we talk about equity and justice, as far as how things have been and what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency can do, you have to look at history. Mm-hmm. And I love that Robby brought up a lot of history earlier, but just to run through very quickly, when you have a concerted effort to take wealth out of one community, which is what has happened to Black people, mm-hmm. if people don't realize, the second biggest time for Black-owned businesses and median wealth was in the late 1800s and early 1900s, right after the Civil War, when we were left to our own devices. Then there was a concerted effort to not give Black people the GI Bill. Then there was a concerted effort to not give Black people housing, which is the source of most generational wealth in the 40s and 50s, with redlining. Then there was immigration, which took a lot of our best people in the Black community and made money for other institutions. Then you had the crack epidemic in the 80s and 90s, which also the crime bill came in the 90s, which put a lot of Black people in jail. So economically, there's always been something that has taken wealth out. The problem is the money that Black people are receiving, we're making more money and we still have the same median wealth as the 1960s. That's a problem. So Bitcoin, in my opinion, and cryptocurrency allows a community like my own, which has an unbanked population of almost 25%, to move into an economy where you can't be taken away. And a decentralized economy, anybody can join. It doesn't matter race, religion, it doesn't matter. If you want to use money, if you want to sell goods and services, you can do that with decentralized money. And going forward, it'll only grow because it looks as though more and more people are going to get shut out from banking and from banking services simply because they won't be solvent. So that increase, I think, over time, and increase in liquidity will give people more trust and help change how marginalized communities use money long term, not just in America, but around the world.
Yeah. And this is an area where I think we need a lot more awareness and understanding of how it could work. And I love that you're bringing history into this, because I don't think we can actually have an informed conversation about the future without it. And I want to pull on a particular thread that you raised. You used the term redlining, and a lot of people don't know what that is. So we should start with a briefing on what that is. Second, on discriminatory banking practices that accompanied redlining in, I think, particularly the 50s and 60s in the United States. How would that series of events and that kind of systemic problem have been different if, in fact, the population was empowered with the capabilities of cryptocurrency then? Can we kind of co-imagine, just for the sake of demonstrating the power of this technology, how could history have unfolded differently if we didn't have those barriers and structures in place? So take us through a hypothetical, which is 50 years ago, how it would have been different. Talk us through it. And start with what redlining is, because I think some people probably aren't quite familiar with that term yet.
Okay. All right. So let's start with redlining. So in the 40s and 50s, there was a practice done by the banks where if you were black and you went to a bank to get a loan for a home, even if you had the same qualifications, there were literal red lines drawn around certain zip codes where you could not live. If you wanted to live in that area, there was a concerted effort to not let you live there and increase the amount of wealth that you could have long term. And then also getting denied for loans by the bank made it so that you had to either work longer, harder, you had to have extra, you had to have perfect qualifications just to get going. So that takes time, and all of that stuff basically resulted in being forced into certain neighborhoods by black people. And then those neighborhoods, the property was taken down because if you look at the highway system of America, every single highway or pretty much every single highway runs straight through the inner cities. And that takes away a lot of the property value because it can never really increase that much. So if you just ever notice, drive down a long highway and when you get off, it's most of the time, mostly black neighborhoods. And that was the actual concerted effort for that to happen because of redlining, because of discriminatory bias. Now, if there was something like Bitcoin around, if there was a digital economy, if there was a way to remove ourselves from that system, we could do it overnight. You could have literally community meetings, local meetings where you say, okay, well, the system that we're in right now won't allow us to get loans. They can barely get jobs because there was, segregation at that time. And of course, at the very root of it, the Fed at some point is going to bankrupt us all if you have any type of foresight, like some people did, like Dr. Claude Anderson, some of the black economics from the 50s and 60s. So first thing I would say is, if we could co-imagine a different world, I would say that most of the black community would move towards cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. If you can't get a loan from a bank, but you can get a loan from something like Celsius Network because you have cryptocurrency, or you can get a loan through some sort of smart contract, that would have been the route to take. Now, unfortunately, I think a lot of black people think, well, we have it good. It's all great, right? Not really. So the same thought process that I would have for the 50s and 60s where we could move to that space is the same process now because we're still doing the same thing. My can that I'm really more about solutions, like let's get it going now. Because we've been talking a long time. I mean, I love doing these interviews. I love telling people about it, but there's been a lot of talk and not enough solutions. And I think this could be a solution that could save us a lot of time as well as help increase our assets long term.
Yeah. So on that, I heard an interview, which by the way, it's very helpful to hear your perspective on this outside of the book too. So it is talking, but trust in the ripple effect. It'll be part of your story, I'm sure. But I heard you speak to a reflection that the Black community missed out on an opportunity to co-build the internet, though there's immense consumption level by the Black community on the internet using web tools today. And you call for applying those learnings to your advocacy for bringing awareness and engagement into crypto now so that it's less of a reactive story and more of an empowerment story. So how can people start acting? What are some of the immediate solutions that you're calling for that go beyond talking about it? Because there is a lot of room for talk. What can people actually do to get into a proactive co-create mode as opposed to a reactive, now we're just dependent on it mode?
Absolutely. So because cryptocurrency is pretty easy to use nowadays, much easier than in the past, if you want to get into cryptocurrency, if you want to get into Bitcoin, download a wallet, start accepting Bitcoin for payment, and going forward, buy Bitcoin at a certain point or cryptocurrency to have skin in the game. So once you've done that, use it. You might have to look at some videos, you may have to look at tutorials, but learn how to send it, receive it, learn what your private keys are. And I write about this stuff in the book, but there's massive amount of information on the internet. And my biggest thing with people is to get skin in the game, to just start, because I see people reading a lot and they're like, well, I don't know if I should do it. I don't know if I should get into it. And most people think I'm taking a risk getting into cryptocurrency. And I say the opposite. I say you're taking a risk not using cryptocurrency. So in order for you to get started, you have to get started. And I would encourage any business owners to accept Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I would encourage any in a profession to learn about the blockchain industry, because if you're a lawyer, that's going to be, in my opinion, a part of law school at a certain point, blockchain law. If you're an accountant, crypto taxes are a part of your job now. You have to learn how to do that. If you're an engineer, blockchain engineers make about 30% more than most regular software engineers in the market. So if you're looking for more money, learn how to code in the blockchain space. So there's a lot of things that you can do, not changing your entire life in order to get into cryptocurrency. And I also like to say that people like to shop. You could use a service like Lolly. You could use Lolly online, buy what you already buy online, and you can get free Bitcoin cashback rewards. I mean, it's just very simple things like that. So anything to get into cryptocurrency, learning about it, and it will take some reading, some education. But if you commit 10, 15 minutes a day, you'll learn it over time. And I think that's the best route for most mainstream people to go.
I love that. I think that like micro learning capability and just helping people power through their fear or their assumptions and barriers, because you can keep putting off the micro changes forever and ever. And it's the little tiny stuff, like exactly as you say, open that little account. Even if it's a small amount of money, you can start understanding how it works and it's not so fearful. And I've heard you say you want people to figure it out before they're forced to, which is a super powerful message. Like, it's not if, it's when, and why not be on the kind of front end of this as opposed to, having to be on your heels through this shift. So what are you seeing in adoption? How is your immediate community, starting with your friends and your family? I mean, is everybody around you kind of on the bus with this now? Have you been more successful than I have been in getting my family to experiment with and spend a little bit of time with whatever it is, MetaMask or whatever tools we might use to empower us? How's it going with your close contacts? What's worked?
Okay. Well, I will say about 90% of my friends and family own Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but that was not the case for a long time. I've been in the space 7 years now. I think they just started listening to me in 2017 when we had the bull run, like most people. All of a sudden, the price was on every news site, and I have bankers who I'm related to who didn't believe it, even though it was a part of their end of year report in like 2014. They still didn't think anything of it. They thought it was cryptocurrency's fake, it's going away. So yes, you are correct. It takes some time. Family members kind of look at you like, I mean, I'm already the black sheep of the family, sort of. So as far as doing tech stuff and just doing all types of AI, artificial, people just look at me like, what are you talking about? So they just sort of believe you when it becomes successful. So I will say keep pushing, and at a certain point, when we get a massive bull run at a certain point, which I think will happen, hyper Bitcoinization as some people call it, when there aren't really any assets to buy, I think that's when people will be forced to be consumers, and hopefully you can get your family there before that happens. Because you're right, it's not an if anymore, it's a when. So whenever it happens, I think in the next 5 years, we'll see a lot of big changes. So if you're listening right now, and your parents or your grandparents or cousins aren't listening to you, just keep pushing. At a certain point, they won't have a choice, but you want to tell them early as possible so you won't feel guilty later.
Yeah, amen to that. That's awesome. So we've covered a little bit of history. We've covered a little bit of adoption. I want to bring our focus into the current moment, because without question, history is being made in America and the world right now. And I don't know about you, but I honestly feel like I should be taking notes and saving newspaper clippings every day for what's happening, so that my kids' kids can tell stories about what this generation is going through in this moment. This is going to be in the history books, specifically with regard to some of the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement. You've talked about this a little bit, how some of the more recent protests have identified the real enemy. And the true enemy is this legacy financial system. So beyond just encouraging people to get on the bus and start using this technology and this tool in a way that's going to help us be a better society and culture and better state as a species, frankly, what's the alarm bell today with regard to crypto, and how can these moments in history kind of merge right now to advance this technology in a way that's going to match to the demand of the cries that we're hearing in the streets? Like, what do you see actually happening at a broader level to address some of the systemic racism that's brought us to where we are today? How do we go from here? What do you see?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I want to start by saying that cryptocurrency does not solve racism. I want to make sure people know that's clear. That's not something I'm saying. But what cryptocurrency does is gives communities leverage financially so that it makes racism very costly and inefficient. Because if you started to see with these protests, every corporation, whether they're virtue signaling or whether they're sincere, has said that Black Lives Matter or that they support Black Lives Matter movement or that they support whatever cause it is, because they're losing money if they don't do it. And honestly, I wish that something like this would have happened before, because it started, you know, a lot of the protests started as just people about Bitcoin. And what I'm starting to see, of course, people put in Google Bitcoin in Black America at these protests. I've seen about 5 different ones at 5 different locations all around the world. So it's one of those things where I think people are like, all right, we've seen this before. We've literally seen these same protests a couple years ago. What is it that will stop it? And I think when you talk about the legacy financial system, if you really dig deep, a lot of the funding that goes into the people who oppress you are through the legacy financial system. And honestly, it hasn't worked for most communities long term. And going forward, I think if you want a real solution, it has to be financial. It can't, there's no way around it. That has to be the foundation of whatever you do, because it's not much protesting and changing you can do if you don't have any money, or if you don't own any assets, such as in cryptocurrency, that in the future will be valuable or be used by the dominant society. So that is what I think it can do to solve it. And that's why I think you're starting to see a change in the mindset. That's what I've always wanted, is just people's minds switch just a little bit. Be vigilant, be, you know, angry, but know your enemy. We should be marching to the Fed every day, but you know, people are wherever they are. So, but yes, now that people are starting to realize that, we just printed trillions of dollars, and people got slapped in the face with a $1,200 check for 3 months. I don't know who could live off of that, especially people with families. That's a slap in the face, honestly. That should be enough for you to get angry. And once that mindset changes, you can't kill an idea. So it'll keep going and keep progressing from this point. Like you said, the ripples have started.
Yeah, super cool. So with the history as a foundation and where we are today, and we know that some of these kind of brick and mortar old structures are not going to serve the future that so many of us are imagining and really working hard to manifest. What is the best case scenario 5-10 years down the road? What do you want to see as what your children are going to be experiencing as they relate to money and currency and opportunity as empowered by this? What is the dream? What's the best outcome that you can imagine? Share with us.
So the very best outcome I could see is that we have hyper Bitcoinization and it becomes the standard asset of the world. Then, because it is provable, it is scarce, like gold was supposed to be, countries begin to use it as their asset that they base their price off of. We start using Satoshis, and then in small communities around the world, cryptocurrencies are used based on their use case. And if we have that going, I believe if you have Bitcoin as the asset, what can happen from that point is you have so much waste in the world that if we move the price in Satoshis, for example, 1 Satoshi today is a few pennies or less than a penny. If 1 Satoshi equals $1 at a certain point, goods will become cheaper, food will become plentiful. Things that have been purposely held back to have scarcity, it's not real scarcity, it's just to hold it back to make it seem like there's a set supply. Bitcoin will release all of that because things will be much cheaper, much more wealth, and a lot better living for people around the world, because people try to act like there's no money, there's no assets. The world is huge and there's so much waste that if we actually distributed it because of lower price based on something like Bitcoin, 5 to 10 years, a lot more, I won't say it's utopia, but a lot more happiness, a lot better living for the people around the world, not just a few thousand that run everything.
So cool. So yes, that More on that. I love this message you share. Tell us a little bit about how you are advocating for this work. I know you've got a couple pretty strong projects. I love your title, The Gentleman of Crypto, and your other organization. Tell us about the work you're doing beyond the book. How do we track your advancement here? Because I know it didn't stop when you got published.
Oh yeah. So The Gentleman of Crypto is a daily show, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We're at episode 573, and we've been doing it since 2017. And we have news updates. We talk about the market, financial markets as well, and we answer questions live every show so that people get the information live as they ask it. And we also wanted to prove that we knew what we were talking about, because as you may remember, in 2017, there was a flood of people coming into the crypto space who just kind of read 2 paragraphs and was like, oh yeah, I can get on YouTube. But we wanted to make sure we did it live so people realize who really knows what they're talking about. And we've been doing that for a while. That is definitely something I work on daily. Also in the book, I write about the blockchain project, which is progressing along great. And we're looking to connect with a bigger company, partnership we're working on now, which everybody kind of knows about, but we can't really discuss right now. So we're working on a huge partnership to bring small businesses to the forefront where they can get investment in Bitcoin. And outside of that, I also own Bitcoin ATMs. Helping people set those up around the world is something I want to do, because onboarding is important. You want to make it as easy as possible. And if you have a cash solution and a digital solution, more people will have access to it. So those are the 3 main things I'm working on, as well as, and I've said to a few people, but not many, the 2nd edition of the book is coming out this year. So working on that as well. And that will take everything up a notch. It won't be as basic, so it'll explain more, as well as more solutions, and also some of the changes that have happened since last year. So I'm working on all that. And as you can say, staying busy.
Yeah, amen. So you've got a lot of passion and outreach. Who influences you? How did you get to this place? Like, are there certain people, whether it's historical or current figures, or people you read or follow who keep putting wind in your sails? Who do you look to for your own kind of motivation and drive?
Oh yeah. So I dedicated the book to an artist named Nipsey Hussle, who I've followed since 2009. We come from similar backgrounds, have similar stories of entrepreneurship, using your own money and being able to basically buy your way out of certain business deals in order to progress. And his music resonated, as well as his message. So Nipsey Hussle, who I dedicated the book to, of course, Thomas Sowell, who is probably him and Dr. Claude Anderson are 2 of the best economists I've ever heard. Listening to them over the years definitely helped. Max Kaiser's fire, about Bitcoin, it always encourages me because I've never seen anybody. I mean, Max Kaiser will come on and rip up $1 in front of everybody. And, yeah, F the Fed, F everybody, and I love it. So that pushes me as well. And I'll say Malcolm X, his message of making sure that Black people have the resources they need, because nobody else is going to help us, was great to hear. And now we can apply that to digital economy. And from there, I actually look up to a lot of comedians as well, because I think they're some of the smartest people on earth. So Dave Chappelle, George Carlin. I watch George Carlin almost every day. So just listening to them, getting the fire under you to do something that you love. Those are some of my main inspirations.
That's super cool. So and on the book front, I love it that you cite some authors. It's interesting getting the younger generation, at least myself as a parent, to recognize the value of reading. And I know that you could have leveraged countless media platforms to get your message out. What is it that's kept you writing too? And how do you make sure that people not only see the video clip or catch you on Twitter, but actually take the time? Like, why what is it about reading and getting kind of dug in on this that you want to communicate to maybe a younger generation that has less patience for even 100, 200 page book?
So in order to catch their attention, a lot of times you have to relate it to what they're already doing. So if you talk to them in video game terms, I've noticed that they already use Fortnite bucks. They already use 2K cash or whatever it is. So when you talk about Bitcoin, they're like, or cryptocurrency, they're like, yeah, that's digital money. We already use it. So it's pretty easy to relate to them that way. And if they won't take it in as far as books, that's why I do the videos. And that's why I have planned most of my upcoming book tour at colleges and at high schools, because I've talked to older people a lot, it's fine. But when you get to younger people, they're the generation that's going to build the things we're talking about right now. There's some 15-year-old sitting in his mom's house right now building something that will probably be the game changer for blockchain or for cryptocurrency. So that's who you want to talk to, and you have to relate the message to them as much as possible. So through gaming, I like that strategy, and also face-to-face, because they like to see that you're a real person. I can talk to you through a screen, but of course, if I can meet you, shake your hand, talk to you in person, the message I think gets across a lot better.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? It is pretty remarkable, though, how humanity seems to have adapted to this two-dimensional modality. I mean, I know of at least a couple dozen projects and companies that have started in the last 4 or 6 months among people who've never met in person. So it's fantastic that even this conversation, we have people all around the world able to join us, as opposed to being in a room, which has all kinds of filters and obstacles to getting to. So that's super positive. If there was a book, one book that you could have everybody in America read this month, summer reading, July 2020, that would have the greatest impact, and you can't say your own book because we all know about that one already. What would it be? What do you think is a message that kind of gets to some of what you're working towards here, that we would all benefit from reading?
I would go the safe route. The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean is perfect. It's probably as good of a book on Bitcoin as you can write, and it actually outlines why the why of Bitcoin, which I love a lot. Got a lot of inspiration from it. So I would say this summer, that will probably be the best book to read. It should change your thoughts on financial markets and sovereignty and individual responsibility. That's why I think a lot of people will read it, because it's not just about Bitcoin. It's about the entire process of becoming free. And once you free your money, everything else is free from there. So I would say the Bitcoin Standard.
Cool. That's great. And when do we get to follow your new book? When is it going to be released? Do you know yet?
Well, we'll be making the announcement July 11th and of the date that is coming out. So on the 1-year anniversary, I'll be announcing that. So look out for that on Twitter, if you follow me there, as well as on the show, The Gentleman of Crypto, and other platforms as well, through email. So yes, I'll be announcing on the 1-year anniversary. It will be out this year.
Incredible. So really, it has been so fantastic to speak with you. I'm personally inspired, and I know a lot of our audience is inspired by your hustle and your courage and your clarity of message and the impact that you are advocating for by leveraging this technology for a greater good. And I have a feeling this is only the beginning for you. I cannot wait to see what's coming for you in coming years. And it's been a great privilege to have a chat. Anyone out there who hasn't had a chance yet to read the book, I know you can find it on Amazon. There's also really fantastic supporting content out there. You've done some remarkable interviews and podcasts, and it's pretty, you made it yourself very accessible and easy to follow. Any final words, thoughts, suggestions, advice, counsel for us out there before we let you go?
Yeah, I would say, even though these are tough times, it's never as bad as it seems, and it's never as good as it feels. So just stay even keel, work through what you got to work through, make sure you invest in cryptocurrency, and like I said, look towards the future. Think long term, think about your grandkids.
Chills. Thank you. Incredible. Good luck to you, my friend. Great to connect.
I appreciate it.
And
absolutely.
yeah, happy trails. Be well.